We all have our favorite Disney movies, but most of us don't know these beloved stories' dark origins. Toes get chopped off, eyes get cut out, and princes are very, very far from charming.
They what?
Seriously, these stories are not for the faint of heart. Get ready to hear about your favorite characters living creepily ever after. You have been warned. Number 1. Cinderella has to be one of the most classic Disney princesses there is. Yet we're not sure that this princess would have made it so far and gotten so famous had Disney not made plenty of tweaks to her story when they got a hold of it. Like most Disney movies, Disney's Cinderella was based on a story that already existed. In this case, it was a Brothers Grimm fairy tale. And in that version, some pretty wild stuff happens. Fans of the musical Into the Woods, you already know a thing or two about this. First, instead of just accepting that their feet are too big for Cinderella's glass slipper like they do in the Disney version, the stepsisters actually cut off their toes and heels to fit into the shoe. And the shoe fills up with blood. Yep, pretty wild. But if you can believe it, it gets even wilder. Cinderella's bird friends are super cute in the Disney version, but in this version, they actually peck the stepsisters' eyes out. And both surprisingly and unfortunately, familiar characters being brutally blinded doesn't end with Cinderella. Number 2. It continues with Rapunzel, aka the inspo for Tangled. Most of us know Rapunzel well enough to know that Tangled sticks fairly close to its source material. In the original, however, the witch tricks the prince into coming to see Rapunzel in the tower even though she's not actually there. When he arrives and notices this, he jumps out of the tower, falls into a bunch of thorns, and ends up blinded. Luckily, Rapunzel's tears are the antidote and he gets his sight back again and happily ever after and whatnot. But that doesn't change just how dark this story got. We're happy the animated version didn't go there. Speaking of animated versions, if you love all things animated, then boy do we have plenty of videos for you. Like and subscribe to the Things Animated for more. Number 3. The Disney version of The Fox and the Hound that we all know and love has no shortage of darkness, but as we've come to expect, the original novel had much more. In the book, the farmer's dog Chief pits Todd, aka the Fox, and Copper, aka the Hound, against each other. Todd ultimately ends Chief's life, and the farmer forces Copper to chase Todd, which results in Todd also meeting his end due to exhaustion. This is pretty sad on its own, but it gets even worse when the farmer ends up shooting Copper. Yeah, this book had no shortage of upsetting content. Number 4. There's also no shortage of upsetting content in the OG Snow White. Snow White was another Brothers Grimm fairy tale, so we already know it's gonna get dark. In the original, the queen finds out that Snow White is the fairest of them all, and of course, she's not happy about it. In this version, though, the infamous poison apple isn't the first thing she tries. She's already made many attempts at ending Snow White's life. She tries to tie her dress too tightly to suffocate her, and brushes her hair with a poison comb. Thanks to the dwarves, these plans all fail. This story ends with Snow White and the prince's wedding, where the queen decides to take one more stab, no pun intended, at getting rid of Snow White. She's caught in the act though, and not only does Snow White make it out unscathed, but the queen faces a very, very harsh punishment at the hands of the prince. She's forced to wear red-hot iron shoes and dance in them until she's no longer with us. Now that's a pretty diabolical punishment, and it's a little concerning that the prince even came up with that. Number 5. Hans Christian Andersen also came up with a few things that we're a bit concerned about. He pinned the OG Little Mermaid, and this one is a doozy. First, in this version, the Sea Witch, who was the original Ursula, didn't just take Ariel's voice as part of the deal. She actually cut out her tongue. That's enough to make this deal sound way less appealing than the Disney version, but it gets worse when you hear that when this version of Ariel got her legs, walking was impossibly painful. So, while she can walk, it's not actually pleasant to do so, which really changes the nature of the deal. Oh, and if that's not enough, the prince never believes that the Little Mermaid is the one who saved him. He thinks it's some other woman, and he marries her instead. Sheesh, this version of the Little Mermaid could not catch a break.
Poor Ariel.
Number 6. The original Sleeping Beauty really couldn't catch a break either. Even with Disney's version of this classic tale, the glaring detail that kissing someone while they're in a coma is equal parts bad and bizarre has always attracted criticism. But what if we told you that this was actually a very, very tame version of the original? In that version, instead of waking Aurora up by kissing her, the king impregnates her while she's unconscious. And she doesn't actually wake up until 9 months later when she now has twin babies, courtesy of someone who she presumably hasn't met. But it's so nice to hear that the king returns to marry Aurora when she wakes up, isn't it? Nope. Because he's actually already married, and decides to marry her too anyway. It's pretty hard to believe they even found a way to adapt this one into a Disney movie.
But when will I see you again?
Oh, never! Never!
Never?
Number 7. The Hunchback of Notre Dame has to be one of the more disturbing Disney classics there is, but surely you've now come to expect that yes, the original was worse. The Hunchback of Notre Dame was first a novel by Victor Hugo, and it's very, very depressing. Quasimodo is locked up courtesy of Frollo, and forced to abduct Esmeralda on Frollo's behalf. Captain Phoebus saves Esmeralda, and the two fall in love. Quasimodo, on the other hand, is publicly humiliated and tortured as punishment for the abduction. Esmeralda gives him water to save him, but then out of jealousy, Frollo ends Phoebus's life and frames Esmeralda for the act. She's hanged as punishment. Number 8. From one unexpected Disney hanging to another, Pinocchio met a similar end to Esmeralda back in his original iteration in 1881. This version of Pinocchio was always getting into trouble and acting reckless, and he was ultimately hanged by bandits in the forest. This serial, titled The Story of a Puppet, was so popular that Pinocchio ended up being brought back to life by a fairy so the serial could continue. Yet upon his revival, Pinocchio's father is swallowed by a fish. Pinocchio ends up getting turned into a donkey and then drowned, which only makes him turn back into a boy rather than ending his life. Then he is also swallowed by the fish. But hey, at least he's reunited with his dad. Number 9. In another not-so-happy tale of father-child reunions, Mulan could have had a far, far less happy ending than it does. Mulan was based on a 1695 poem called The Ballad of Mulan, and this poem ended very differently than the Disney movie. The beginning of the film follows the poem fairly accurately. Mulan goes to war in her father's place. Yet in the poem, Mulan meets a fellow warrior who happens to be the daughter of the king. The two become close friends, and when the king has been conquered, the two women offer to sacrifice themselves to save the king's life. They live, but when Mulan returns to her home, she learns that her father has passed away in her absence, and her mother has married someone new. Mulan's identity is then made known to everyone, and she's forced to become a concubine as punishment.
I don't think I can do this.
Rather than accept this punishment, though, Mulan takes her own life. Well, we are certainly happy that the movie didn't end that way. Number 10. Peter Pan first appeared in the 1902 novel The Little White Bird by J.M. Barrie. In the novel, Captain Hook attempts to poison Peter Pan, but Tinkerbell drinks it to save Peter's life. Peter then pushes Captain Hook into the water where he's eaten by a crocodile. Number 11. There's more than one earlier version of Beauty and the Beast that's much darker than the one we know and love. In one, Belle is actually sacrificed to live in the Beast's captivity by her own father. In another, Belle's sisters are jealous of her, and they are ultimately transformed into statues in her front yard, so that they're forced to watch Belle have a better life for all eternity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean any harm.
So, did we scar you? Did this ruin your favorite movie?
I didn't mean to tell. It was an accident.
What was your favorite origin story? Let's talk about it in the comments. And for more videos like this one, be sure to like and subscribe to The Things Animated.